Welcome everybody to EPG Pathshala. I am Shouvik Mukhopadhyay from Department of History, Kolkata, and today in this module we will be focusing on the influence of Bhakti in different aspects on the Indian society, culture. This will fall under or pertain to the paper of social and cultural history from the earliest times to 1707. Today, as I told, that we will be focusing on the influence of Bhakti. Already you have seen that Bhakti emerged in South India, and after emerging from South, it slowly but steadily traversed the whole of Indian subcontinent, and during the medieval period, that is from 12th 13th century onwards, it started moving into the directions of northern India. Here we will be trying to focus on how it traveled, and then we will try to see what were the influences of Bhakti in different aspects of life. But to begin with, as a cue from the earlier chapter on Bhakti which emerged in South India, that is South Indian Bhakti, we will be trying to look into the origins and the essence of Bhakti religion. Philosophical concepts of Bhakti has been enunciated in the Upanishads, as already we have seen in Shvetashvatara Upanishada, as well as in Mahabharata in the episode, Ekalavya episode. The concepts of Bhakti and concept of inflicting injuries on oneself for the sake of the Guru, these concepts were already there in Upanishada as well as Mahabharata. Later, in the Bhagavad Gita as well as Ramayana, the elements or kernel of Bhakti was already there, which emphasized upon love and devotion as the gateway to God. These concepts were definitively transformed in South India, where the internal concepts of love, particularly Viraha Bhakti, made a kind of metamorphosis of the North Indian seeds, and it sprouted into a very strong Bhakti movement in South India, where the Alvars, the Vaishnava saint poets, and the Nayanars, the Shaivite saint poets, gave Bhakti its definitive foundation. Later, this happened in the 6th to 9th century. Later, in the 12th, 13th century, the philosophical concepts of Bhakti was laid down, particularly by the Vaishnava Acharyas, and in the case of Shaiva Bhakti, we will ultimately see that the concept of Shaiva Siddhanta philosophy, in the context of Vaishnava Bhakti, the concept of Vishishtadvaita philosophy emerged. According to this school of thought, Supreme Being is not attributeless Nirguna, but Saguna, possessing qualities of goodness and infinite beauty. This is a very important distinction between Saguna and Nirguna, because this will ultimately affect the nature of Bhakti philosophy or the Bhakti concepts as it developed in North India. What are the basic features of the Bhakti, taking the South and the North together? The features of Bhakti movement can be summarized as follows. The concept of Bhakti means single-minded devotion to one God. The object of the devotee's devotion and veneration is to secure the grace of the God for the sake of salvation. Here, a distinction has to be made, a very clear chasm or a change has happened between the renunciatory religion, as in Buddhism and Jainism, and the Bhakti movement or the Bhakti concepts, where in the renunciatory philosophy, it was the individual effort which would ultimately lead one individual to his or her salvation, moksha. But in the context of Bhakti, the whole concept of salvation gets transformed, because here, despite your own effort, if you are not getting the compassion of or the grace of God, Arul, your effort will become fruitless. So here it is the intervention of the God which is very essential, and to get the grace of God, you have to submit yourself. So there is the concept of surrender, complete surrender at the feet of God, which becomes very essential in the context of Bhakti. The Bhakti also discarded the earlier forms of ritual and sacrificial mode of worship and established rituals based on temple-based idol worship. In the earlier context, in the Vedic religion, the sacrificial mode was very, very important. Now, the concept of sacrifice gets completely transformed, metamorphosed, where it is not sacrificing some animals, but sacrificing oneself. Self-sacrifice at the altar of God, which makes the Bhakti so very unique. Later, we shall see that some of the variants of Bhakti discarded rituals altogether. So, in the context of Bhakti as it emerged in South India, temple-based ritual was very, very important. But later, when it traveled to North India, we will see in the later time that it was ultimately discarding some of the forms of Bhakti, was discarding rituals altogether, temple worship altogether, and emphasizing on purity of heart and mind and simple devotion as the way to realizing the God and ultimately achieving salvation. Some more features of Bhakti, that is, Bhakti movement was essentially monotheistic, and devotees worshipped either a particular form, saguna, or formless, nirguna, as I told. Exponents of Bhakti also greatly emphasized the importance of Guru in securing the true knowledge from him. Many of the Bhaktas in South India as well as in the later North Indian form were drawn from the lower castes, especially in the latter period in the North India, which gave the popular impression that Bhakti was essentially an egalitarian movement. But while discussing about South Indian Bhakti, that we have seen that it was not a social revolution, but social negativism was prevalent. Bhakti discarded priestly domination. Bhakti saints preached in simple languages of the masses and thereby immensely contributed to the development of modern Indian languages such as Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, or Gujarati. This influence of Bhakti on the development of modern literature and culture that we will emphasize later on. Finally, Bhakti was a widespread movement and got spread over the whole of Indian subcontinent. The movement in the later stages were also profoundly influenced by the Islamic beliefs, and practices, and in turn influenced the South Asian Islam as well. One of its agenda was to reform the Hindu-Indic religion to withstand the onslaught of the Islamic propaganda. The other objective was to bring about the simplification of the traditional caste-bound practices. This bhakti emerged and was enunciated by host of saints. Leaders of bhakti movement initially were from South India. When it traveled to north, moving spirits were Ramananda, Kabir, Nanak, Chaitanya, and others. Many of the North Indian exponents like Kabir or Nanak were essentially eclectic in their views and outlook. Earliest exponent of bhakti in North India who actually acted as a bridge between south and north was Ramanuja. The concept of Ramanuja traveled to north via Ramananda and effected the change in the North Indian scenario. If we talk about Ramanuja, because he was a major factor or major individual, Ramanuja lived in Tamil Nadu around 1100. He combined Shankara's Advaita philosophy with Vaishnava Pancharatra theology, which the Pancharatra theology claiming that Vishnu is the very foundation of the universe. And this synthesis between Shankara philosophy and Pancharatra, this ultimately became the doctrine of the Sri Vaishnavas, which is known as Vishishtadvaita. Ramanuja is the exponent of Vishishtadvaita philosophy, according to which God is all-encompassing and eternal, but not undifferentiated. The individual souls, Chid, and the inanimate matter, Achid, are the divine qualities, Vishishta, and thus both real and divine. The individual souls are at once one with God and separate from Him. This was the very essence of the difference between Shankara philosophy and the Vishishtadvaita philosophy of Ramanuja. Salvation consists of the unification, sayujya, of soul and God. They are two different entities, and there can be a kind of union between the two. And this union could be achieved only by leading a virtuous life and acquiring knowledge of the secret of differentiation by which individual soul is kept apart from the God. The final consummation of this marriage, spiritual marriage, is possible only by means of the devotion, bhakti, and by grace of God. Here comes the importance of bhakti. The impact of Ramanuja's writings and his long service as the head priest of the famous Vishnu temple at Srirangam ultimately made his ideas widely known among the Vaishnavites. And it is no accident that Ramanuja's name spread across at a time when bhakti centers of the pilgrimage were emerging in different parts of southern and central India. In this manner, Ramanuja's ideas, his concepts, and his name traveled from south to north. It was Ramananda who flourished in the first half of the 15th century, was the first great bhakti saint of North India. There is a popular verse to the effect that bhakti arose first in Dravid Desh, Ramananda brought it to the north, and Kabir spread it to the 7 continents and the 9 divisions of the world. Ramananda was the worshipper of Rama and believed in two great principles. One, the perfect love for the God, and two, the human brotherhood. He adopted vernacular as the medium of his discourses. In his teachings, the rigors of the caste were greatly softened. Ramananda did away with the insularity of the social behavior of the Hindus by throwing open the door of the spiritual salvation to all walks of life. His unique contribution to Indian spiritual life was the spirit of synthesis between the philosophy of meditation and the absolute surrender, prapatti, absolute surrender at the feet of God. Ramananda's God, he used the name of Rama, was God of love and mercy without any imperfection, not the eternal Brahman or Vedantam, but the beloved and the friend and the Lords of one's heart. This was the nature of Ramananda's God. It is said that the first 12 followers of Ramananda, of which Ravidas, the cobbler, Kabir, the weaver, Dhanna, the Jat, peasant, Sena, the Berber, Pipa, the Rajput, or Bhavananda, etc., were there. Some of them were not personally initiated by him. They were drawn to his ideas long after his demise. Ravidas was one of the most famous disciples of Ramananda. There are about 30 hymns of Ravidas collected in Guru Granth Sahib. He was the worshipper of one infinite God over and above all religious sects without the beginning or the end. Among the Bhakti saints, Kabir's position is very unique and very prominent one. Kabir more than once expressed his reverence to Ravidas, which connects Ravidas with Kabir. Kabir was the most radical disciple of Ramananda. He was the quintessential teacher. He had the courage to condemn what he considered sham and counterfeit in both Hinduism and Islam, which actually required a huge amount of moral courage in those days. Kabir refused to recognize caste distinction or 6 schools of Hindu philosophy. He held that religion without bhakti was no religion at all. Asceticism, fasting, or alms giving is useless without being accompanied by bhajana, that is, devotional worship. Kabir was a great satirist and ridiculed all the institutions of his time. He was the spokesman of poor and downtrodden section of the society, and Kabir provided us with a code of ethics, condemned pride and prejudice. He was an householder, so he was not a denouncer, married to Loi, and his son Kamal was also a thinker and a devotee. After Kabir's death, the followers wanted to form a sect of their own and asked Kamal to lead, but which he refused. Later, the Muslim followers of Kabir organized themselves in Maghar, where they founded a monastery, whereas the Hindu disciples organized themselves under Surat Gopal with their center at Varanasi. The chief scripture of the sect is known as Bijak, which was a kind of compilation of the Kabir's couplets, which he used to compose. Later, among the Kabir's followers, the most famous of the followers of Kabir's ideal was Dadu. He was born in Allahabad and died in a village, Narana or Narayana in Rajasthan, where his followers, the Dadu Panthis, had their chief center. Dadu did not believe in authority of the scripture but of self-realization. At the request of Dadu, his disciples made a collection of devotional outpourings of different sects. The first of its kind, Guru Granth Sahib, much later than this composition, Guru Granth Sahib became such a kind of anthology where the collections of many saints were included. In the collection made by Dadu, sayings of many Muslim saints like Qazi Qadam or Sheikh Farid and others, they were also included, which shows a kind of eclecticism of these people. Among the many disciples of Dadu, Sundar Das, Rajab were distinguished personalities. He insisted on using vernacular language for composition. Next comes Nanak. Guru Nanak is one of the most illustrious exponents of North Indian Bhakti. He shares the eclectic spirit of the time shown in Kabir or Dadu. He used both Hindu and Muslim nomenclature for God. For instance, Rama, Govinda, Hari, Murari, Rab, Rahim, all these words were used to express the concept of God. The social teachings of Guru Nanak were basically reaffirmation of the ethical ideas common to the medieval monotheistic religious doctrine of human equality. He started free community kitchens called Guru Ka Langar, where the social restrictions on commensality were done away with. He was well educated, unlike unlettered Kabir, and had travelled to faraway places. He was a monist, and his monotheism, unlike other bhaktas, was undulated. Nanak said that devotion cannot exist without virtue, and God is not outside but within every individual. He that pervades the universe also dwells in the body. His mission was to reform the Hindu religion on the basis of unity of the Godhead and to bring about friendly relations between the Hindus and the Muslims. Kabir, Nanak, they all pertained to the Nirguna Bhakti. In the context of Saguna Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti emerges as a very important component. It was a kind of further development of Vaishnavism and characterized by the rise of the Krishna cult. Krishna was no longer regarded only as the incarnation of Vishnu, but the highest God himself. Bhagavat Puran, perhaps the greatest of all Puranas, which was composed possibly in the 10th or 11th century, was devoted to this elevation of Krishna. Mysticism of the Krishna cult found its most vivid expression in the poet Jayadeva's Gita Govindam, or which was composed around 1200 either in Bengal or Orissa. And there the poet describes the emotional and erotic terms love of Radha and Krishna, where the quest of the soul, Radha, for the unification with God is symbolized in this way. At the same time, God is visibly attracted to the soul. So, God is also not very aloof. He is also looking for the follower, the devotee, and hence he is being praised as Radha Krishna, the God who is identified by his love. Exponents of Krishna Bhakti foremost can be considered as Chaitanya. Chaitanya was the great exponent of Krishnite form of Vaishnavism. His activities gave a great impetus to Vaishnavism and made it popular all over the Bengal and Orissa. Krishna alone was the most perfect being according to his views, and after his death, his followers systematized his teachings and organized themselves into a sect called Gaudiya Vaishnavism. At his behest, Mathura was chosen by his disciples as the center of Krishna cult. This was a very important decision because in this way, northern India emerged from several centuries' eclipse by the rapid development of Hinduism in southern and central India. The region now has begun to regain its religious importance. In cooperation of Mathura was actually favored by the Kachwa rulers of Amber, and they lavished huge grants. In this manner, Ambar emerges as a very important religious site and the foundation of the great Govindadeva temple there, and along with the decisions of Chaitanya and the other exponents of Krishnite Bhakti, this resulted in growth of Mathura as a very important religious center. Other components of Krishna Bhakti are Mirabai, Vallabhacharya and Nimbarka. Nimbarka's date we are not very certain about. Vallabhacharya was a contemporary of Chaitanya, but first with Mirabai. Another great exponent of Krishna Bhakti was Mirabai, known for his bridal mystic outpourings. While discussing about South Indian Bhakti, there we have seen that Andal, the great woman saint poet, Vaishnavite saint poet, her writings also evoked such kind of bridal mystic thing where the god is imagined as the marital partner. Meera is said to have composed numerous devotional songs. Her lyrics are her chief title to fame. Her lyrics are addressed to Krishna. On the other hand, Nimbarka and Vallabha, two South Indian Brahmins, settled down at Mathura near Vrindavan, which is associated with Krishna's life on earth. Here, they pursued their metaphysical speculations concerning this relationship between Radha and Krishna. To them, Radha becomes a universal principle which enables the god Krishna to communicate with this world. Not much is known about Nimbarka's life. Vallabha lived from 1479 to 1531 and he was a contemporary of Chaitanya and he was the founder of the Vallabhacharya sect, which became known for its erotic Radha Krishna cult. Vallabhacharya's philosophy centers around the conception of one personal and loving God. He believed in the path of grace, in the path, marga, of grace, pushti, and devotion, bhakti. These concepts were then being propounded by songs through the means of songs and other cultural means. Kabir or Nanak, they themselves composed enormous number of such devotional songs. But other than these religious leaders, there were saint poets like Surdas. He was popular in the Mathura region and there he composed his poems in Brajabhasha. Three works believed to be of Surdas and they are very popular: Sur Saravali, Sahitya Ratna and Surasagar. They depict Krishna as a child. On the other hand, Tulsidas wrote Ramcharitmanas and had drawn an ideal picture of his favorite deity. Here I will take a short break and I will just give you an example of the kind of songs that they were composing, which will give you an idea about the impact on culture which this devotional songs were having. The song that I am referring to was composed by Tulsidas and part of the Ramcharitmanas thing. Janani मैं न जीऊं बिन राम राम लखन सिया बन को गवन किनो पिता गए सुरधाम. I sang this song particularly to remind everybody that there are thousands and thousands of such songs, soulful rendering, which brings the bhakta close to the God. Apart from these chief proponents of the Vaishnavite bhakti, there were numerous minor sects popular in different regions like that of Shankaradeva in Assam, Another important feature of the Bhakti movement, popular in Maharashtra, was the cult of Vithova or Vitthala, the deity at Pandharpur, who was regarded to be the manifestation of Krishna. The first school of the devotees of Vitthala is known as the Varkari sect, mild devotees of Vitthala. And just like in North Indian Bhakti, there are a number of Bhakti saint poets in Maharashtra as well, like Namadev, Ekanath or Tukaram, who have also composed such kind of very soulful, heart-melting songs. They have composed such popular songs which is known as Abhanga. Next comes the Shiva Bhakti. Very briefly we will look into it. Shaivism also gave rise to many popular sects. They all agree that the great god Mahadeva was the very foundation of the universe. But they gave different answers to the great question about the relation of God to individual soul and inanimate matter. They also had different rites with which they distinguished themselves from each other as well as from the Vaishnavites. In northern India, the most prominent school of thought was Kashmir Shaivism, founded by Vashugupta, a renowned teacher in the early 9th century. Vashugupta advocated a kind of monism which, in contrast to that of Shankara, did not regard the real world as illusion. Rather, it was an emanation of the divine spirit. South Indian Shaivism, originally shaped by the thought and poetry of the Nayanars, produced in the later medieval times the school of Shaiva Siddhanta and the famous reform sect, the Lingayats, strong in Karnataka. With this new system, the Shaivites could match the overpowering influence of Ramanuja's Vaishnavite philosophy, which had put them on the defensive for quite some time. The Lingayats arose as a radical movement against caste system and the Brahmin orthodoxy. They were to retain this position for centuries. Their founder was Vasava, a Brahmin who was the minister in the court of the Kalachuri king of Kalyani in the western central India around 1160. Bhakti transcended the borders of Indic religion, the Hindu religion, and impacted upon Sufism as well. According to Al-Biruni, who came in the 11th century in India, the Sufi theories of soul are similar to that of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. He also identified the Sufi doctrine of divine love as self-annihilation, fana, with the parallel passages from Bhagavad Gita. Nizamuddin Aulia's table talk gives description of his conversation and admiration for the yogis. The Hatha Yoga treatise Amrita Kunda was translated into Arabic and Persian in the 13th century and had a lasting impact on Sufism. Cross-fertilization of the Sufi beliefs with the Kashmiri woman Jogi, the Shiva Bhakta Lalla or Laldhed, is reflected in the growth of the Rishi movement of Sheikh Nuruddin Rishi. Through his verses, he tried to reach the unknowable in the heart by lighting the lamp of love. Hindi poetry was also having a deep impact on the Sufi ideas and vice versa. Abdul Wahid, in his Haqaiq-e-Hind, justified the practice of using Indic imagery in Sufi literature by using the Sufi equivalents for the terms such as Krishna, Radha, Gopi, Vraja or Gokul. The popular literature like Padumabat, written by Malik Muhammad Jaisi, shows the familiarity with such imageries. Jaisi himself wrote Kanahavat, that is his version of the Krishna's life, in Awadhi language. Thus, the Bhakti religion, growing from south, reaching north, by another 400 years or 500 years had a tremendous impact on all the aspects of Indian life, be it social atmosphere or literature, culture. Everything was affected, and this contagious effect also had a tremendous impact on the Sufi religion as well. So in summary, we can say that Bhakti resulted in a kind of devotional religion. It gradually expanded from south to north. Its impact can be realized or felt in different sections of the society, and the impact was not just confined in the religious sphere but had a tremendous impact on language, literature and culture. Thank you.